Let's do it.
That dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil.
Before we get to that, so he's talked about he's talking about his realization of where he's led people to, and to have that realization, you got to be real with yourself. So Dr. King was brave enough to admit that the path that he was on wasn't the best path for black people in the long run. But to have that realization, you got to be willing to be real with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I do think a lot of people today, because of in 2022, we have access to so much information and so many people and so much misinformation within our own communities. So with so much access to all of this information, especially here on YouTube, right? You don't know, sometimes you don't know who's who. And we have so much access to so much information. Some people are deliberately misinforming people. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so with all of this access to information, and some people are deliberately misinformed by others, and so they're giving information that they're standing on, but they haven't really uh, confirmed the information to be true. So you have a lot of people who are repeating narratives and information that in the long run is not going to help our community. But are you brave enough to really look in the mirror and assess what you've given to your community? Are you really willing to look in the mirror and to not just look at the things you've done well for your community, but are you willing to look at some of the things that may have come short? I say that because those are things that I have I've had to do for myself in the past, doing community work, asking myself, is this really working for the people that we're serving? Because me and you had these conversations, and I've called you up many times frustrated because I'm feeling like what we're doing is not enough. But if we're not being real with ourselves, if we're not authentic with ourselves, if we don't have the courage to look at the actions that we have and what we're doing and how we are contributing or not contributing to our community, we'll never have the realization of the burning house that people are being led into, especially today, because I think it's several burning houses and several burning buildings and coliseums and stadiums and all these things that are going on right now because we have so many quote unquote leaders who are misleading people. That
Mm-hmm.
that's what I get with, but because I commend him for being brave enough to say that, and then coming up with ideas to work to reverse that. But today, there are so many people who are just hell bent on trying to be somebody that they don't give a damn about misinforming people. And those are things that we got to look out for because we in these burning buildings, and the fires have gotten hotter since Dr. King said that.
Yeah, the key thing that I took away, like, so even growing up, right, because of the household I grew up in, I never really was educated to agree with his position.
Hmm.
So there was no disrespect for him, and I want to make that clear. Like, you can disagree with somebody and still respect their position and the work they put in, which is why when old girl said what she said about Dr. King, I was right on board with lighting her up.
Yeah.
Um, but in this clip, that part is one of the reasons why I respected him. was
Yeah.
the ability, the strength, the willingness to look back and say, okay, I got this part wrong. All right. And to admit it publicly, and then to try to change course and do something different.
Right.
Um, but one of the reasons I think that he was steered wrong is because he was caught up in the feelings. He says the feelings of hope and the feelings of
Mm-hmm.
optimism, and
Mm-hmm.
realizing that those were superficial. Um, Most of the time, your feelings, especially when you caught up in the spur of the moment, are going to be superficial. That's what kind of drives emotions, the immediacy of what's happening. And that's we constantly get caught up in the feeling good, which is why we're always only ever dealing with surface level,
Feelings.
superficial issues. So his ability to say, they were a tad superficial, they were.
Mm.
So how did we have other leaders that countered that and that weren't caught up in the movement? And those are the people that we can point to and say those people were guided by an understanding of where we are in its proper historical context.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that even being is one of the things that separated Malcolm and Martin. Not to say Martin was not a student of history, but to say that Malcolm, we know, was informed by some of the best and brightest
Yeah.
historical figures the
Right.
black community has ever produced.
Right.
And we can't say that about Martin. Not to say that he wasn't, just to say that we don't know
Right.
if he was not.
Right. Right.
So I think that's one of those things where I go back to all of the activists and advocates. They've got to be paired up and partnered up with the
Yes.
historians, with the people
Yes.
like yourself that are doing that groundwork to understand current times in their proper historical
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. Yeah. Feelings. I'm glad you articulate that the way you did, because feelings is, like you said, feelings is what got us into this place, and feelings is what keeps us here. And the the people who are keen on misleading our people, they understand how we operate, and they understand how to manipulate people's feelings, and they understand how to get people to do certain things that they want them to do, because people have gotten into their feelings and they learn how to get into people's feelings. I make you feel good. I make you feel radical. I make you feel this. I make you feel that. And we're, like you said, we're running off of pure feeling, and none of it has any facts or evidence to prove it. It's just straight feeling. Other groups of people who don't like us understand how we operate. They study us. We don't study us, but they study us, and they understand how we operate. So that the manipulation is easier with us, because just get us caught up in our feelings. Just get us caught up in our feelings. Like you said, going back to the clip of, I'm gonna say her name, the B Simone chick, right? She, when she made those crazy remarks about Dr. King, she was what, caught up in her what,
Mm-hmm.
feelings. Oh, that she got, the other girl said something and she got triggered, and that led her to say that crazy stuff she said out of her mouth, the disrespect man, right? Feelings is what gets us in this situation. Feelings is what's keeping us here.
But
So
before we continue, real quick, I want to articulate because some people might not know. The position of Kings that I disagree with was the belief that we could successfully integrate into society, period. And at that time period, with things being the way they were, the idea that we could um, pass some laws and force our way into the American mainstream and have everybody be okay and cool and all of our problems be solved in this. And I understand I'm simplifying his views, but I'm trying to sum up the entirety of his views in a couple seconds, which admittedly isn't fair to him. But I never agreed with that idea that integration was even on the table, much less possible. So my stance on integration versus assimilation, blah 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 blah. But that's what I'm saying. I didn't agree with. I didn't agree with the idea that we could successfully integrate into America, and I still don't agree with the idea that we can successfully integrate into America, because America doesn't want integration. It wants assimilation of all minority cultures. But again, that's a whole nother conversation.
Assimilate into white American culture. So, but let's keep going.
Which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation. I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended, but I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during a time of war. That is something about a war.
Now, right there, and I know he's going to continue on, but for me, just in the interest of allowing him to continue on, and to make kind of the points that I'm making, um, what he's getting at right here is the fact that it's the dynamic of the society versus the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're struggling with these cultural wars and these cultural stressors between white culture and black culture, we all exist within American society.
Yep.
And when a nation or a society goes to war, there becomes a drum, a hard force placed on members of that society, all culture groups, to coalesce around their national identity at the
Yep.
expense of their cultural identity.
Yep.
And so if the nation's at war, if American society is at war, and you're still talking about your cultural issues, well, now people have the opportunity to label you as unpatriotic, and they
Yep.
have the opportunity
Yep.
to label you as a distraction from
Yep.
the greater needs of the society, and it makes it that much harder to get any sort of cultural issues or internal social issues dealt with, because everybody has coalesced around their national identity, and we all become an in group to the people we're at
Yeah.
war with, who are now the out group. So I just wanted to make
Yeah.
that
No,
clear.
but that's great, because in addition to that, like you were saying, we are concentrating on what's happening to us. America, if America's at war, America is concentrating on being at war. So
Mm-hmm.
that means an even greater lack of resources and care to the black community that's depending on white America.
Right.
So hey man, forget y'all problems. Like you say, come on, what? You ain't down with this war? Y'all ain't come on. Y'all black folk ain't down with this war. So y'all worry about y'all. So okay, all lives don't matter. American lives don't matter. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the dynamic of, well, black lives matter. Well, no, all lives matter. And they're telling black people, you don't matter to us. You only matter to you. But in the greater cultural scheme of America, this is America. So assimilate. You don't matter. When they say I don't see color, they telling you you ain't. I don't see color because I don't need to see color, because I'm a part of the dominant group. Why do I need to see color? You need
Mm-hmm.
to see color. I don't need to see color. How's me not going? That's what the white people are saying. How's me not seeing color going to negatively affect me? Because in 2022, the only thing we can really do for people is try to get them fired from their jobs. The one of the dumbest things I feel like black people got on the internet right now is these gratifying racial moments, right? Because when black people have a gratifying racial moment, somebody hurt somebody's feelings. Some black
Mm-hmm.
person hurt somebody's feelings of another race. When white people especially have a gratifying racial moment, black people die, somebody get locked up, somebody lose resources, somebody's life is totally disrupted when white people have gratifying racial moments. We need to grow up. We need to grow. Going back to what Dr. King was saying earlier, we're all up in our feelings. We need to get up out of our feelings and grow up, because in the greater scheme of things, we're still begging a nation that don't like us to do stuff for us. We still are in a position to have to beg Forget y'all little stank, stupid, gratifying racial moments that don't mean now. So what? You feel better because you hurt somebody's feeling. Once again, when black people have gratifying racial moments, somebody's feelings hurt. When white people have them, somebody dies. Yeah. All right. Let's keep going.
War like this that makes people insensitive, it dulls the conscience, it strengthens the forces of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness and hatred and violence. I think the biggest